All right, let's get into it. We're about to dive deep into one of the most fascinating and, honestly, one of the most misunderstood texts from the ancient world, the Atharvaveda. It's got this whole reputation. It's wrapped up in mystery, controversy, a whole lot of talk about magic. But what's the real story behind it all? Well, that's what we're here to find out. So, right off the bat, we're faced with this huge question that scholars have been wrestling with for, well, centuries. You see, for a really long time, tradition always talked about 3 sacred Vedas. So, where does this fourth one, the Atharvaveda, actually fit into the picture? Was it like a later addition, or has it been there all along, just hiding in the shadows a bit? This is really the heart of the whole mystery. Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we're going to follow the clues. First, we'll look at the big controversy. Then, we'll hunt for evidence in other ancient texts. After that, we'll tackle the wild puzzle of its manuscripts, dig into that whole sorcery reputation, and finally, check out all the different branches of knowledge it holds.
All right, let's jump into the first part of our investigation, the controversy itself. Now, the whole reason there's even a debate is because a ton of really important, really old sources only ever talk about a sacred trio of Vedas. And, well, that kind of seems to leave the Atharvaveda out in the cold, doesn't it?
And this idea has a name. It's called the Trayi, which, you guessed it, literally just means triad. It's always referred to the big 3, the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Yajur Veda. These were seen as, the essential toolkit for all the major ritual sacrifices. So for a very long time, the official count just stopped at 3.
This right here, this lays out the debate perfectly. On one side, you've got that traditional triad, the Trayi. But on the other, you have how most people see it today, with the Atharvaveda included, making it 4. You can see how just adding that one text completely changes the picture. So the big question is, which one's the right one?
So how do we answer that? Well, we have to put on our detective hats and dig into the texts themselves. Let's look at the evidence, because it turns out that whole story about there only being 3 Vedas, yeah, that's not the full story, not by a long shot. And this is what's so wild. The texts that mention a Fourth Veda aren't some obscure, forgotten scrolls. No, these are heavy hitters. We're talking about the Aitareya and Taittiriya Brahmanas, the Mundaka Upanishad, and here's the big one, the Gopatha Brahmana, which is directly linked to the Atharvaveda tradition. All of them, they explicitly mention 4 Vedas. This is huge. It tells us the idea of a Fourth Veda wasn't some later invention. It was right there in the conversation way back then. Okay, so the evidence in the texts points pretty clearly to 4 Vedas. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. That just opens up a whole new can of worms, a massive new challenge for scholars, actually finding the text. We're not talking about just grabbing a book off a shelf. This was more like a globe-trotting scavenger hunt. I mean, just look at this. This is an actual page from a handwritten manuscript. Think about that. Every single letter was copied by hand, painstakingly. And over hundreds of years, these incredibly precious documents got scattered all over the place. Some were lost, others ended up in totally different collections. A page like this, it's such a fragile, tangible link to the distant past.
And this just drives home the scale of that challenge. If you wanted to put the Atharvaveda back together in the 19th or 20th century, you had to get your hands on manuscripts from Paris, Oxford, London, all the way to Pune and Bikaner in India. It was this incredible international effort just to bring all the scattered puzzle pieces into the same room so they could even begin to understand the whole thing.
All right, so we've established its place as the Fourth Veda, and we've seen how hard it was just to piece it together. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The thing it's most famous, or maybe infamous for, its reputation as a book of magic and sorcery. You hear this phrase a lot, Atharvaved mein jadoo tona. It basically means magic and sorcery in the Atharvaveda. And look, this idea spread like wildfire. It created this image of the text as being all about, dark spells and black magic. But is that really what's going on? Here's the thing. When you actually look closer, these so-called spells are something else entirely. They're more like hymns and rituals aimed at really practical, very human goals. We're talking about things like gaining knowledge and prosperity, making sure you and your family are healthy, protecting yourself from harm, and yeah, even getting an edge over your enemies. These aren't just some spooky incantations. They're about the things we all want, a safe, healthy, and successful life.
And for the final piece of our puzzle, we need to understand that the Atharvaveda isn't just one single book. It's way more complex. Think of it like a giant tree with all these different branches. These branches are called Shakhas, and each one represents a whole different school of thought, a different way of passing the knowledge down. It just adds this whole other layer of richness to the story. And this really shows you just how big that tree once was. We know from ancient texts that there were at least 6 major branches, or shakhas. But here's the absolutely staggering part. Out of all of them, we only have manuscripts for 2, the Paipalata and the Chanakya. The rest, they're just names now, completely lost to time. It's a powerful reminder that what we can study today is probably just a tiny fraction of what once existed. So let's pull it all together. The Atharvaveda is so much more than just a simple book of spells. It's this incredibly complex text with a really debated history. It's the story of a monumental effort by scholars to piece it back together from fragments scattered across the world, and it's a perfect example of how a reputation can completely overshadow the real purpose of something, which was really about helping people live better, healthier lives. And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? The whole story of the Atharvaveda, how it was debated, then lost, then pieced back together, only to be totally misunderstood, it's just a powerful journey. It really makes you wonder, how many other pieces of ancient wisdom are out there just waiting to be rediscovered, or maybe, more importantly, to be truly understood for what they are? It just goes to show how fragile knowledge can be and how much our own perceptions can color the past. Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining me on this.